What if the moment she starts pulling away isn't the moment she stops caring, but the moment she becomes afraid of how much she cares? Think about that for a second. She was warm. She opened up. She let you closer than she normally lets people get. Then suddenly, she becomes distant. Her replies get shorter. She needs more space. She seems less emotionally available. And your first instinct is to think, she's losing interest. But sometimes the real battle isn't happening between you and her, it's happening inside her. Because for someone who struggles with emotional closeness, intimacy can feel like two opposing forces pulling in opposite directions. One part of her says, "Come closer." Another part whispers, "Be careful." And the closer she gets, the louder that second voice can become. This is where you need to understand something important. Distance doesn't always mean rejection. Sometimes distance is protection. A person can genuinely enjoy your presence, think about you, feel emotionally connected to you, and still become uncomfortable when the relationship starts becoming serious. Why? Because closeness creates vulnerability. And vulnerability means allowing another person to affect you. It means admitting that you care. It means realizing that someone now has the ability to disappoint you, reject you, leave you, or hurt you. For someone who has learned to survive by depending primarily on themselves, that realization can feel threatening. So what do? They create distance. Not necessarily because they want you gone, but because distance temporarily makes them feel safe again. And this is where many people make a devastating mistake. They panic. They start sending more messages. They ask, "What's wrong?" They demand reassurance. They try harder. They become more available. And without realizing it, they turn emotional space into emotional pressure. Now she doesn't simply feel her own fear. She feels yours too. And pressure rarely creates genuine intimacy. This doesn't mean you should automatically assume every woman who pulls away is secretly falling deeper in love. That's fantasy. Sometimes distance really does mean someone is losing interest. Sometimes someone simply isn't ready for a relationship. Sometimes their feelings are changing. Your job isn't to create a comforting story that explains everything. Your job is to observe, look at the pattern. Was she previously consistent? Did she willingly invest? Did she open up emotionally? Does she return after taking space? Does she still show genuine interest in your life? Does she gradually become more comfortable with closeness? Those details matter, because psychology becomes useful only when it helps you see reality more clearly. It should never become an excuse to ignore reality. So if she suddenly pulls back after becoming emotionally close, don't immediately chase her. Don't interrogate her feelings. Don't assume you've done something wrong. Take a breath, give her room, and watch what happens when there is no pressure. If she cares, space gives her the opportunity to process what she's feeling. If she doesn't, space gives you the truth. Either way, you gain something valuable, clarity, because the goal isn't to convince someone to love you. The goal is to understand whether the connection is strong enough for both people to move toward each other. Sometimes she isn't running from you. She's running from what being close to you makes her feel. But only her actions over time can tell you which one it is. And this is where the contradiction becomes even more interesting. The more deeply she begins to feel, the more vulnerable she may become. At first, everything feels easy. There are conversations without pressure. Laughter comes naturally. She enjoys your attention. She lets herself become curious about you. But then something changes. The connection starts becoming real, and suddenly you're no longer just someone she enjoys talking to. You matter. And that can create fear, because attraction is exciting when the emotional stakes are low. But when someone realizes, I could actually get hurt by this person, excitement can quickly become anxiety. She may begin asking herself questions she never expected to ask. What if I get attached? What if he leaves? What if I lose my independence? What if I need him more than I want to? What if I open up and regret it? Notice the contradiction. She may want closeness while simultaneously fearing what closeness could cost her. So she creates distance. She becomes quieter. She takes longer to respond. She suddenly needs more personal space. She may even act as though she cares less than she actually does. And if you don't understand the psychology behind that behavior, you may immediately take it personally. You think, I must have done something wrong. But sometimes the trigger isn't something you did. Sometimes the trigger is simply the realization that the relationship has become emotionally significant. That realization can make a person feel exposed. And when people feel exposed, they often return to whatever behavior has made them feel safe in the past. For someone who protects themselves through independence, that might mean creating distance. It's almost like an emotional thermostat. Closeness increases. The internal temperature rises. And suddenly, the person needs to step back just to feel balanced again. But here's the important part. Don't romanticize this. Don't tell yourself that every withdrawal means she's secretly falling madly in love. That's not wisdom. That's wishful thinking. Real emotional intelligence means holding two possibilities at once. Yes, she may be struggling with vulnerability, but she may also be losing interest. The only way to distinguish between them is through patterns in behavior over time. Does she eventually come back toward you? Does she make an effort? Does she remember details about you? Does she show concern? Does she gradually allow herself to become more emotionally open? Does she try to maintain the connection even when closeness makes her uncomfortable? Those things tell you far more than one cold conversation ever could. And here's what you should never do. Don't try to force vulnerability out of her. You cannot argue someone into emotional safety. You cannot demand, tell me how you feel right now, and expect genuine intimacy to appear. You cannot chase someone into becoming comfortable with love. Safety cannot be forced. It has to be experienced. So remain steady. Give her room to breathe. Don't punish her for needing space, but don't abandon your own needs either. There is a difference between giving someone room and waiting indefinitely for someone who refuses to meet you halfway. That distinction will protect you, because if she genuinely cares, space may give her the chance to process those feelings without feeling trapped. And if she doesn't, that same space will eventually reveal the truth. Either way, you don't need to panic. You don't need to chase. You don't need to become someone you're not just to keep her close. Let her experience her own emotions. Let her decide what she wants. And let her behavior show whether she has the courage to move toward the connection she feels. Because sometimes the deepest conflict isn't between two people. It's between desire and fear inside one person. And when she pulls away, this is where your response matters more than you realize. Don't chase the withdrawal, give it room, because the instinct to pursue someone who is becoming distant can feel almost automatic. You feel the change. You notice the shorter replies. You sense the emotional temperature dropping, and suddenly your mind starts searching for an explanation. Did I say something wrong? Is she losing interest? Should I text her? Should I ask what's happening? And before you know it, you're trying to close the distance she just created. But what if that distance isn't asking you to move closer? What if it's asking for space? When someone becomes overwhelmed by emotional closeness, pressure can make the very thing they're afraid of feel even more intense. Imagine someone standing at the edge of the ocean. They want to enter the water. They are curious. They may even take a few steps forward. But then the waves become stronger than expected. What do? They step backward. You don't drag them into the water and tell them, you're fine. You give them a moment to regain their balance. Emotional intimacy can work the same way. If she is genuinely struggling with vulnerability, your calmness can create something pressure never can. Room. Room to think. Room to feel. Room to miss you. Room to understand what she actually wants. But there is an important distinction here. Giving space is not disappearing as a manipulation tactic. It's not ignoring her to make her panic. It's not pretending you don't care. It's not posting pictures designed to provoke jealousy. And it's certainly not turning the relationship into a psychological competition. That's not confidence. That's insecurity wearing a costume. Real confidence is much quieter. You can care about someone and still give them room. You can want the relationship and still refuse to chase someone who is stepping backward. You can be available without becoming emotionally dependent on their availability. And that balance is powerful, because when you stop chasing her withdrawal, you allow her behavior to become informative. If she needs a little space and eventually comes back with warmth, communication, and effort, you learn something. If she continues distancing herself indefinitely, you learn something too. Either way, you stop guessing. Your watching is important because emotional fear should never become an excuse for endless inconsistency. You can understand why someone behaves a certain way without accepting every behavior they produce. That's maturity. Maybe she is afraid of being hurt. Maybe she has learned to protect her independence. Maybe closeness feels unfamiliar. You can have compassion for all of that. But compassion doesn't require you to abandon yourself. Your standards still matter. Your emotional needs still matter. Your time still matters. So if she pulls away, don't immediately run after her. Take your hands off the steering wheel of her emotions. You don't need to control whether she misses you. You don't need to force her to explain herself. You don't need to convince her that you're safe. Let your consistency speak louder than your pressure. Continue living your life. Continue pursuing your goals. Continue being social. Continue becoming stronger. And if she chooses to move closer, again, let that movement be hers, because there is something deeply revealing about voluntary effort. Anyone can respond when you pursue them, but when someone chooses to cross the distance themselves, that tells you much more. So don't chase the person who needs space. Give her the room to decide whether she truly wants to close that distance. And remember, space should reveal connection, not become a substitute for it. And this is where you have to become much more observant, because one moment of distance can be misleading. She pulls away today, and your mind immediately creates a story. She doesn't care. She found someone else. She was only pretending. Or, on the opposite side, you tell yourself something equally dangerous. She is definitely falling deeper in love. Both conclusions can be wrong. One moment doesn't reveal the whole truth. Parts do. That's why you should stop judging the relationship by a single conversation, a delayed reply, or one quiet week. Look at what happens repeatedly. When she creates distance, does she eventually return? When she returns, does she make an effort? Does she initiate conversations? Does she remember what you told her? Does she show genuine curiosity about your life? Does she make time for you? Does she become more comfortable with emotional closeness over time? These details matter because behavior has a memory. People can say almost anything in a moment. They can say they miss you. They can say they're confused. They can say they need space. But eventually, their repeated choices reveal what their words cannot. And this is especially important when you're dealing with someone who seems emotionally avoidant. You might see her pull away after a beautiful moment together. Then, days later, she returns as though nothing happened. You might wonder, what does this mean? It could mean she became overwhelmed. It could mean she needed emotional space. It could mean she missed the connection. Or it could simply mean she enjoys having you around without wanting the responsibility of a deeper relationship. You cannot know from one event. You need the pattern. Imagine watching someone walk through a maze. One turn tells you almost nothing. But after watching them for a while, you can see the direction they're consistently moving. Relationships are similar. Don't become obsessed with decoding individual moments. Study the direction. Is she gradually moving closer, or is she repeatedly creating distance without taking responsibility for the impact? Is communication becoming healthier, or are you constantly confused? Is her effort increasing, or are you carrying the entire connection? That's where clarity lives. And here's something else you need to understand. A person can have strong feelings and still be incapable of maintaining a healthy relationship. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. She may genuinely care about you and still struggle with intimacy. She may miss you and still avoid commitment. She may feel deeply connected and still retreat when things become serious. Feelings are not the same as emotional capacity. That's why you shouldn't measure love only by intensity. Measure it by what someone can consistently build with you. Because eventually, feelings have to become behavior. If she cares, does she learn to communicate? If she is afraid, does she gradually become willing to face that fear? If she needs space, does she return and reconnect respectfully? If there was conflict, does she attempt to repair it? These are the signs that matter, and if the answer is consistently no, don't keep creating explanations for her. Don't turn every disappearing act into evidence of hidden love. Sometimes the truth is simpler. Sometimes someone isn't ready. Sometimes they don't want the relationship. Sometimes their feelings aren't strong enough. And accepting that possibility is not pessimism. It's emotional intelligence. Because you don't protect yourself by assuming the worst. You protect yourself by refusing to assume anything without evidence. So watch the pattern. Don't chase the moment. Don't worship the explanation. Let time reveal the direction. Because when you stop analyzing isolated signals and start observing consistent behavior, confusion begins to disappear. But understanding her fear does not mean surrendering your standards. This is where many people get confused. They learn about emotional avoidance. They discover the psychology behind withdrawal, and suddenly every unhealthy behavior gets a romantic explanation. She disappeared because she cares too much. She won't communicate because she's afraid of intimacy. She keeps pulling away because she's falling deeper. Maybe, but maybe not. And you cannot build a healthy relationship on maybe. Compassion is important, but compassion without boundaries can become self-abandonment. You can understand why someone behaves a certain way and still decide that certain behavior isn't acceptable for you. Think about the difference. If she needs a little space, you can respect that. If she says she is overwhelmed and needs time to process her emotions, you can listen. If she struggles to express herself but is genuinely trying to improve, you can be patient. But if she repeatedly disappears, refuses to communicate, returns only when she feels lonely, and expects you to remain available no matter how inconsistently she treats you, that's different. At some point, understanding becomes enabling, and you have to recognize that line, because your self-respect should not disappear simply because you understand someone's wounds. You aren't responsible for healing another person's emotional history. You can support someone. You can listen. You can create a safe environment. But you cannot do their inner work for them. They have to choose that. And that's one of the most important lessons in relationships. Love doesn't mean tolerating everything. Love doesn't mean waiting forever. Love doesn't mean accepting confusion as the price of connection. Healthy love requires two people who are willing to participate. So if she pulls away, don't punish her. But don't abandon yourself either. Keep living your life. Keep your standards. Keep your friendships. Keep your goals. Keep your emotional center. And if she comes back, don't immediately erase every boundary because you're relieved to see her again. Let the relationship rebuild gradually. Let trust be earned. Let consistency become visible. Let her actions demonstrate that she isn't simply repeating the same cycle, because words are easy when emotions are high. Behavior is harder. Consistency is harder. Accountability is harder. And that's why they mean more. You should never have to become smaller to make someone comfortable enough to stay. You shouldn't have to suppress your needs because you're afraid that asking for basic communication will make her disappear. You shouldn't have to constantly decode silence. And you shouldn't have to convince yourself that emotional pain is proof of passionate love. That's not romance, that's confusion. Real emotional strength allows you to hold two truths at once. She may be struggling with vulnerability, and I still deserve consistency and respect. Those statements can exist together. You don't have to choose between empathy and self-respect. In fact, the strongest form of empathy includes respect for yourself. So give her room when room is genuinely needed. But don't put your life on pause. Be patient where patience makes sense. But don't become endlessly available to someone who refuses to meet you halfway. And never use psychological knowledge to explain away behavior that continuously hurts you. Because the goal isn't to understand her so perfectly that you tolerate anything. The goal is to understand human behavior well enough to make wiser choices. If she is afraid, she can choose courage. If she needs space, she can communicate. If she cares, she can eventually demonstrate it. And if she cannot or will not do those things, you are allowed to step back. You can care about someone deeply. And still choose yourself. That's not cruelty, that's self-respect. And eventually you arrive at the question that matters most. Not, how deeply does she feel? But what is she willing to do with those feelings? Because love cannot remain hidden forever. If she genuinely cares, eventually that feeling has to become movement, a message, a conversation, an effort to reconnect, a willingness to become vulnerable, a desire to understand you, a decision to stop running every time intimacy becomes uncomfortable. You don't need to rescue her from her fear. You don't need to chase her through every retreat. And you don't need to prove that you're worthy of being loved. Give her the space to make her own choice. If she gradually moves toward you, communicate openly, becomes more consistent, and allows herself to be vulnerable, then you have something real to work with. But if she repeatedly disappears and expects you to remain waiting indefinitely, don't call that hidden love. Call it information, because the deepest form of emotional intelligence is knowing the difference between someone's feelings and their capacity to build a relationship. She may care. She may even care deeply. But you deserve more than feelings that never become action. So don't measure love by how intensely she pulls away, measure it by whether she eventually finds the courage to move closer. And while she makes that choice, keep making yours. Choose your peace, your standards, and your self-respect, because you don't chase someone out of their fear. You give them the space to choose courage.